Donald Trump has set a deadline for Thanksgiving, which is this Thursday, for Ukraine to accept the terms of the deal. We don't know if that applies to this new version that apparently was agreed in Geneva. But Trump has sounded quite optimistic. He wants to get this done. Of course, he wants that Nobel Peace Prize.
I'm joined by US reporter Harriet Alexander this evening. Good evening to you.
Hi, Kate.
Hello. Let's start with the Ukraine peace plan then, because Donald Trump believes major progress has been made on the US-backed peace plan. This is after representatives met in Geneva over the weekend. So yesterday in Geneva, both US and Ukraine representatives met. This was to discuss the 28-point peace plan that had been brokered by Russia and the United States. We talked about that on the show last week. Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, hailed the talks as the most productive the US have had on the issue.
We arrived here today with one goal, and the goal was to take, is 28 points or 26 points, depending on which version as it continued to evolve, and try to narrow the ones that were open items. And we have achieved that today in a very substantial way. Now, obviously, like any final agreement, they'll have to be agreed upon by the presidents, and there are a couple issues that we need to continue to work on. But I think the report today is that I think today was worthwhile. It was very, very, it is probably the most productive day we have had on this issue.
President Zelensky has warned that a major problem outstanding is the condition of signing over legal control of Ukrainian territory to Russia. Well, Rubio very positive there. Trump also sounded pretty encouraged earlier on. I mean, I don't know how much American gas there is to those comments, Harriet, but there is at least movement. Has there been much consternation over there about how remiss the original 28-point plan was, or was that just meant to be a kind of negotiation starter?
I'm not sure consternation is the right word, really, Kate. I think, generally in the US, people just want it to be over. I mean, there is some sympathy, I think, with Donald Trump's position that the bloodshed must end, that this war has gone on for far too long. I think a lot of people would agree with that as a starting point. Consternation over the 28 points? Perhaps, yes. I think as long as you took it as just a starting point, and that would be okay. Over the weekend, there was some coverage of this idea, of course, strongly rejected by Marco Rubio himself, that this was that the 28 points were basically Russia's version. Rubio had to say at the weekend on the talk shows, no, this is not Russia just dictating the terms. This is something that we came up with. But what we understand from the Sunday meeting in Geneva is that those 28 points have now been reduced to 19, and that there have been some significant changes made to it. There's a story in the Financial Times today saying that it's basically unrecognizable from those 28 points. For instance, among those 28 points with the idea that Ukraine would be forced to reduce the size of its armed forces by a third, from 900,000 down to 600,000. That apparently has gone from this latest version. And there's some questions about, handing over the entire Donbass as well. That seems to have gone. So, perhaps there is more positive movement, but we haven't yet heard from the Russians as to what they make of it all.
Yeah, well, look, we know that Russia's trashed Europe's peace plan. Europe came up with their own sort of counter-proposal, meanwhile, which has been swatted aside by Russia. But then they probably would do that. I mean, you've also got to question how kind of constructive that is from Europe. Perhaps they feel they need to put forward something. All the while, the most attractive thing to Russia is this US brokered peace plan. But then you're going to get the issue of whether they're going to agree to the newly modified version of it, the 19-point version.
Right. And I think, perhaps it is true that there is progress, that people are more optimistic, because at least now we're getting to the crux of what might be possible. And they might still be fairly far apart. But I think for most people, it was very encouraging that the talks were held in Geneva over the weekend, because up until that point, it was pretty safe to say that it was a strongly Russian influenced and pro-Russia proposal. This will perhaps give it a bit more balance. Donald Trump has set a deadline for Thanksgiving, which is this Thursday, for Ukraine to accept the terms of the deal. We don't know if that applies to this new version that apparently was agreed in Geneva. But Trump has sounded quite optimistic. He wants to get this done. Of course, he wants that Nobel Peace Prize. So maybe it does mean there is a bit more wiggle room and things could progress quite well.
Yeah, I think, I mean, this is just based on reports that I was listening and reading earlier. I think that deadline has been softened a little bit in the interests of progress being made, but I suppose progress will need to continue. And it's interesting because, again, from Donald Trump, we had, well, he criticised Kyiv, didn't he, yesterday for showing zero gratitude, but today said something good just may be happening. I mean, perhaps this is all part of the negotiation technique.
Yeah, he does like it when nations show a lot of gratitude for him. He said that Ukraine showed zero gratitude, despite, of course, Zelensky in his last visit going over and over again about how grateful he was. And Trump said, Ukraine has zero gratitude. And then Zelensky tweeted, "Thank you very much for all of your work." So, yeah, I mean, then we go round and round in circles, don't we, with Ukrainian gratitude. But, progress, hopefully, we just need the Russians to see what they make of these proposals.
Yeah, OK. All right. Let's move on from that. Well, actually, no, because one point I wanted to mention with you is that we're hearing gathering reports, or reports with gathering speed, whichever way you want to look at it, that Zelensky will travel to Washington this week to meet with Donald Trump. Are you hearing the same over there?
Well, that would be interesting. There's certainly nothing similar coming out from the White House regarding Russia. The New York Times is reporting that there's no plans for a US-Russia meeting in the near future at all. Thursday, of course, being Thanksgiving, it will shut down much of the US, and Friday potentially as well. So if Zelensky does want to come, he better get a move on. But it'll be a big sign if he does.
Yeah. And look, we've had news, haven't we, on, Donald Trump and President Xi had a telephone call, and it looks like there may be a visit to China by Donald Trump.
Yes, I mean, Trump has long wanted that. He's talked quite frequently about how he would like to have better ties with China. They obviously have masses to talk about regarding the tariffs. If you recall their last meeting, there was a lot of words, but it didn't really seem like it accomplished a huge amount. So could there be another meeting on the horizon? Yes, and I think they still have an awful lot to work through.
OK, all right. So, well, that's coming up in the new year. Let's talk about James Comey, because there's been some significant news this evening about the former FBI director. A district judge has dismissed the charges that were brought against Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James after finding that the prosecutor was illegally appointed. Comey, who pleaded not guilty to charges of making false statements and obstructing Congress, says the charges brought against him were politically motivated. He's posted this message to his Instagram.
The President of the United States cannot use the Department of Justice to target his political enemies. I don't care what your politics are. You have to see that as fundamentally un-American and a threat to the rule of law that keeps all of us free. I know that Donald Trump will probably come after me again, and my attitude is going to be the same. I'm innocent, I am not afraid, and I believe in an independent federal judiciary.
Let's just track back a little bit. What is Comey accused of doing?
So this stems from a 2020 appearance that he made before the Senate, where he testified that he did not know how internal FBI reports, of course, Comey was the head of the FBI, he did not know, he did not authorize the publication to the media, the leaking of an internal report into the potential Russia interference in the 2016 election. So that was sort of Comey saying he didn't know anything about it. He was then charged with making false statements regarding to that. But the circumstances of his charging were really interesting, Kate, because a series of prosecutors in Virginia, they refused to press charges. They said there was no grounds and that these charges couldn't stick. So Trump then, his Department of Justice, got rid of these prosecutors. And in their place, there was somebody called Lindsay Halligan. She is a former beauty queen. She had never prosecuted a criminal case ever before, but she was given the job of interim prosecutor 4 days after being given the job, she then prosecutes James Comey, but now the judge has overturned it by accusing her of prosecutorial misconduct and basically saying that she couldn't have been appointed in the first place because of a technicality. She shouldn't have been appointed in that time frame.
Yeah, she was appointed to the role at the president's direction, no prosecutorial experience at all. And Ms. James, the Attorney General, Letitia James, also had the same ruling. So she was also subject to a prosecution by Lindsay Halligan as well. What have the White House said? Are they accepting this?
Just on James, I mean, her case is slightly different because that was related to mortgage fraud, but it was quite a murky case. You were never quite sure of what the real details were of this. I mean, the two things that unite Comey and James is that they are sworn enemies of Donald Trump. He can't stand them, frankly, and he feels that they are both out to get him. The White House has not been commenting on this, but it is widely believed that they may appeal this ruling. The cases were dismissed with prejudice, which means that they can't be refiled. And the judge said that this was necessary given the huge damage that this could potentially do. But the Trump administration is thought likely to try and appeal this all the way to the Supreme Court.
Wow. Okay. There was some. There's some words from the US District Judge Cameron Curry in his 26-page ruling, just to sort of help explain this further. He said the implications of a contrary conclusion are extraordinary. Basically, if it hadn't been ruled like this today, it would mean the government could send any private citizen off the street, attorney or not, into the grand jury room to secure an indictment so long as the Attorney General gives her approval after the fact. That cannot be the law. And the White House saying this will not be the final word on the matter. That from Abigail Jackson, the White House spokesperson. There we go. Right. If you've had your dinner, great. If you're eating your dinner, well, you might want to cover your ears just for a minute because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Has been, he, how do I say this nicely? He was the recipient, wasn't he? Was he the recipient of some erotic poetry? He sent it, sorry, but I think he was also the recipient as well because there are two people in this party. But anyway, what is going on with the Secretary of State for Health?
Yes, so this is a very media US story that has got everybody talking and fascinated by this. Essentially, a journalist, fairly high-profile journalist, young, very glamorous woman called Olivia Nuzzi. She was writing for New York Magazine, which is quite influential. She wrote a profile of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. when he was a presidential candidate, and it appears that they embarked on a non-physical affair. So that was a lot of phone calls and a lot of messages. What has happened now is that she has published a book about this relationship, and her ex-fiance, who she was with at the time, he is publishing a series of posts on Substack where he offers a counter narrative to the excerpts from her book. And as part of that, from the ex-fiance, we have some of the poems which RFK Jr. wrote to her. They're fairly graphic. I'm definitely not going to go into detail, but one part.
Look, yeah, go on, Harriet.
I was going to say, no, this is the most sanitized bit I could get. I mean to subdue and tame you, my love. There you go. Very beautiful, but there's a lot of other references that I really don't want to go into.
I am a river, you are my canyon. I'll leave our listeners to paint by numbers on that one. I mean to flow through you. I mean to subdue and tame you. More details, you can find those online. And this is from her ex-fiancé. He said, and I love this, I can't say that there weren't any signs. I did find it odd that Olivia was simultaneously reading Robert Greene's The Art of Seduction and Maureen Callahan's Ask Not, The Kennedys and the Women They Destroyed. Published a poetry to counter a campaign of misinformation by his former fiancée, who's denied that an affair took place. Harriet, thank you. Nice point to leave it on there. US reporter Harriet Alexander there. Cheers.